the Carolina searches are underway with gas being poured on this thing. They've apparently hired a consultancy firm to help them whittle down candidates. They've already requested interviews with, I think, 9 head coaching candidates, including, by the way, PFF Bobby, first-year offense coordinator with the Houston Texans, is in demand for head coaching jobs. But 9 head coaching candidates, a bunch of GM candidates is already. Who wants that job? I guess is the easiest way of asking that question.
That's the question, right? I mean, again, I said there's only 32 of these things, and so everybody should. But given what has happened in Carolina, how Tepper is yet again hiring another head coach, and it's another failed coaching search, coaching assessment, coaching tenure under David Tepper. It felt like the balance of power with Fitterer there, but he came in after Matt Rule, so he didn't really have a lot of power, and then he kind of did when Frank Reich was there, but then Reich wasn't great, and then Fitterer's now fired. It's like, man, it just felt like the decision-making pyramid or pyramid of power, if you will, was like all out of place. And David Tepper's at the very top. We know that, but how big of a chunk of the pyramid is David Tepper? Is he actually going to allow the general manager to kind of do the job that they are hired to do? And I don't say that in just the tasks, but I also mean allowed to fail, the freedom to make the decisions, like those kinds of things. Because for as much as Tepper kind of comes out and says, no, like I trust these guys completely, they're making the decisions, I don't know how much that's the case. I really don't. So they're going to cast a wide net. There's no doubt about it. Ben Johnson, I think, was requested for a second interview with them. When I say second, I mean that he interviewed with them last year before taking his name out of the hat and going back to Detroit. There's you mentioned PFF Bobby is one of those candidates. Dave Canales, the offensive coordinator for the Bucs, is. Todd Monken, I think it was one of those as well. This was on the list for Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn, the defense coordinator for the Cowboys, he's got a lot of requests, and Carolina is one of them. So they're casting a really wide net, but the question remains the same. Whether you're an offensive coach, whether you're a defensive coach, whether you're young, whether you're old, who wants to work in Carolina right now?
Yeah.
Because, damn, when you are an owner and a general manager and just a front office, you have the ability to keep things pretty quiet. You have the ability to keep things pretty closed door. And it feels like we have already figured out a lot about how frustrating it's been in Carolina. It just doesn't bode well for whoever's coming in there next. You've got to have this guarantee that you're going to be able to do the job that you were hired to do without somebody looking over your shoulder, especially somebody who has never coached before. And I don't know if that's the case in Carolina. Maybe it is. But as the head coach, you also can't come walking in that door in Carolina and tell the owner of the franchise, hey, I want full control, or I want the freedom to be able to do what I want. The owner could be like, all right, get out of here. It doesn't really happen like that. And I think Matt Rule was the guy who actually had that sort of power, and it fell so flat on its face that I don't think Tepper's going to do that again. I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question of who's going to want this job. So we'll see. When
Schefter, I think, tweeted yesterday that PFF Bobby was getting an interview in Carolina, I tweeted out being, hey, look at PFF Bobby go. The number of people that tweeted me back and said, tell him not to take that job was insane. And I get it. I mean, this is the thing. This is now a job opening where the candidates of the PFF Bobby style, young, up-and-coming, sort of first head coaching opportunity type, I doubt they want it. I mean, this is why Ben Johnson withdrew his name a year ago. I don't imagine he's going to want it any more this time around than he did a year ago. Like, the interview is one thing, but I'd be very shocked if Ben Johnson became the Carolina Panthers head coach without a biblical sum of money being thrown in his direction. So,
if you are a head coach that has options, Carolina can't be high on the list.
Right. So this is what I'm saying. I think the young up and coming coaches that are sort of in demand right now are not going to want that as their first job. I think the other end of the spectrum, the Dan Quinns of the world, the guys that have sort of had a shot, failed, rebuilt their reputation, are hot candidates again to give it a second try. I don't think they're going to want a piece of it either, because they're like, I understand what went wrong the first time around. I need to make sure I can do all those things, whatever it is, to say that it doesn't happen again. The last thing I need is just a loose cannon in the form of ownership, like lobbing mortars on me randomly throughout the course of a given week. So I don't see them wanting to be interested in it, which leaves you with what exactly? Like the candidates that nobody kind of wants in the first place.
I think it's going to be somebody on the extreme ends of the spectrum that you just talked about there. If you are a young or old head coach and you have options, I don't think Carolina is going to be very high. But I don't think it's going to be Dan Quinn, because I think Dan Quinn's got options. But just as an argument, like if Dan Quinn felt like this was his last shot at getting a head coaching gig, that's probably an older seasoned candidate that would take it. If you were a young offensive coordinator, like I look at Dave Canales, and Dave Canales has done some really nice things with the Buccaneers this year, but it was his first year as an offensive coordinator. It was his first year as a play caller. And so when it comes to Bobby Slovic, Ben Johnson, Brian Callahan, like Jim Harbaugh, like a bunch of these other like head coaching candidates who might have other options, they might have more to their resume to get more interviews and have more looks. I don't know how many head coach interviews this cycle Dave Canales is going to get other than Carolina. So if he gets this, and if the interview goes well enough, and if some of these other candidates that maybe they're above him end up saying no, if Canales has a head coaching option on the table, and this was the only place that he interviewed for, that's a guy who I could see taking this job, just because of, like I said at the very beginning, only 32 of these.
Yeah.
You don't get very many shots to be a head coach. What happens next year if he comes back and calls plays for the Bucs and things absolutely tank? Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but what happens then? Well, then you're not getting head. Look at Byron Leftwich, right? From the same franchise. Byron Leftwich, those early Brady years, he almost had ink on the paper to be the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then that kind of fell through. We went, some other opportunity will come up for him. Leftwich ain't even in the league. So that's where I think a young or old candidate might be interested in Carolina if they feel that is either their last shot or their only shot. And that's kind of who I ultimately think is probably going to get the gig in Carolina.
Yeah, to be clear, and to their credit, every candidate I've seen named as somebody that they're trying to get an interview with, I think is a good option. Like, I think they're hitting the right names. But equally, because of that, I guess, I have yet to see a name that I think would take that job if it was offered to them. Like, I think both Canales and PFF Bobby, I think they both stay where they are for a year rather than take that job. If that's the only opportunity they get, right? Whether it's interview or whether it's he interviews a bunch of places and that's the only one that offers him the job. I mean, who the hell knows? I haven't asked him, and I certainly am not speaking with any kind of inside information, but I would imagine Bobby would take another year in Houston, do it over, come back an even hotter candidate next year and look for better opportunities than take the Carolina job, because he's like, wow, what if that doesn't happen? What if I stink next year? What if this is my one shot? I feel like those guys have more self-confidence, delusional or not, than to sort of think that way and say, I got to take this. I got to take the job.
Yeah. But again, money and opportunity talks.
Money is the thing.
Tepper's got a lot of money. And I know a lot of these guys certainly take pride in it. The ones who have aspirations to be head coaches will want to be head coaches, and they don't want to just go in any situation and kind of like ruin their head coaching reputation. So that's absolutely something that you think about. But like, if somebody's about to pay you, let's just say $7.5 million a year than you're currently making, and you're about to ink a 3 or 4 year head coach deal where that is fully guaranteed, that is generational wealth.
Money
that is very difficult to say no to.
Money changes everything, and the only NFL owners with more money than David Tepper are the Broncos ownership group, who already made their move a year ago, so they're not even in the running, right? Tepper he is the biggest fish in whatever pool he is in financially, and he's also, by the way, I mean, if you read any of those sort of articles about David Tepper and what he's like as an individual, in addition to what we're seeing just from publicly available clips of him lobbing water on fans and screaming outside of, rooms and stuff. One of the things that it sort of brought up in that is he has so much money that he is willing to weaponize that money out of whatever whim takes his fancy, right? Now, one of the stories in an article was about him musing that he could just buy a restaurant of a guy that was a jerk to him as a server and ruin it, right? Just to get back. You were a dick to me, so I'm going to buy your business, bankrupt it, and put you out of a job. That feels like an equal trade-off here. What I'm saying is, Ben Johnson has already disrespected the man, right? He's already said, no, I'm not interested in your job. I would rather be at a lower position elsewhere because you are such a mess. If David Tepper comes back to Ben Johnson again and is like, I'm going to ask you for a second time in a row, do you want my head coaching job? And Ben Johnson tries to turn him down again, David Tepper is going to back up all of the money in the known universe and say,
he's going to buy the Lions.
Right, and say, all right, turn me down now, Ben. I dare you. I am offering you $15 million a year. I dare you to turn it down.
No, at that point, he's going to sell the Panthers, buy the Lions, and then fire Ben Johnson.
No, he can't. So that he knows that he can't ruin him. So what he has to do is to make him accept the job, right? And the only way to do that is to just keep increasing the number of zeros on the end of the offer until he says yes.
I mean, that's my dream scenario.
But I think that's the one area where it could all change, right? He could offer somebody the job.
It's the money thing. But again,
they say no.
I think that these coordinators who have options elsewhere or know that they are solidified enough to maybe have options in the future, which I will say is a very risky thing to do, right? We talked about some of these other guys who've been offensive defensive coordinator candidates, hot on one side or the other, and it just has fallen through. They never became head coaches. I think it happens all the time. So the time and to think that you might have that opportunity a year from now, 2 years from now, whenever it is, that's a dangerous game to play. But the one of money can change a lot of things for a lot of people.
And it changes it even for people that are filthy stinking rich. You only have to look at how the Saudi Pro League in soccer is busy. Just they throw money at players that are already rich. These guys have been earning, $200,000 a week for the last X number of years, and Saudi is still able to throw game-changing money at them to the point where they're willing to go over and change everything. So I think it's David Tepper has the financial firepower to change the conversation, even to people that have made millions and have millions and are sitting there with a lot of money already. If David Tepper wants Dan Quinn, I'm sure Dan Quinn has made a boatload of money already in his NFL career, right? David Tepper can still change the dynamic with the number of zeros he puts on the end of that offer to Dan Quinn in a way that might make him change his mind. He's got that kind of financial firepower. Absolutely.